Yeah, people are trying to will the Eagles to take a linebacker, Russ, but they haven't done. They haven't taken an off-ball linebacker since 1979 in the first round. So until they do it, I'm not going to believe it.
John McMullen and Jody McDonald here with you on Birds 365. The countdown to the NFL draft is on, and we've got a guest joining us to give us some insight as to what's shaking out a couple of weeks before we actually get down to day one and the pickings of the new NFL talent. Russ Brown is the guy who had on my national radio show a couple of weeks ago, and I see via his Twitter that he's also doing some new work now for Woodward Sports Network. Russ, first of all, thanks for jumping on board. What is Woodward Sports Network?
Mac, man, it's great being back with you. Appreciate you having me on. But yeah, Woodward Sports Network is basically a year-old Detroit sports media company. They really emphasize on video and audio. They're connected on a couple of the FM stations out here in Metro Detroit. So they brought me in to do a draft show for them. And, we'll be doing a live draft show in a couple of weeks when the draft kicks off. So pretty exciting stuff. My lifelong goal is always to just be like on radio, and it's slowly happening. So we're just kind of letting it ride, and we'll see how long we can go for.
Well, Russ, since you're in Detroit, let's start at the top of the draft and 1, 2, and yeah, I think everyone kind of looks at the edge rushers and how it's going to shake out. Is that where you think Jacksonville and Detroit are going to go in that type of direction?
I do believe that. I still, part of me wants to believe, and maybe it's just me being hopeful that the best player in the draft ends up falling in the laps of Detroit. But part of me believes that maybe Jacksonville is still spinning the tires on looking at an offensive tackle in this group like an Evan Neal, because he's so explosive of an athlete. He's just got terrific size. He's very versatile on the offensive line. And if you really are going to build things around Trevor Lawrence, another offensive lineman makes a lot of sense. And also some things that I've just kind of gathered over time is that there's a chance that Cam Robinson might not have signed his franchise tag yet. And I find that very interesting. I don't know if that's true or not. I mean, I'm not there signing the paperwork or anything, but it certainly has sounded like maybe he's been hesitant on signing things, or they've been hesitant on having him sign things. And maybe it's because they want to see who they're actually going to end up taking here. Again, I still think if I had to put the pickings today, it would be Aiden Hutchinson 1, Kayvon Thibodeau 2, or an outside chance of Malik Willis at 2.
All right, so you said maybe the best player drops to the Lions at number 2. Is that in your mind Aiden Hutchinson? If the Jags were to go with an offensive lineman in number 1, is there a big difference between Hutchinson and Thibodeau with the second pick in the draft?
Not really. I mean, I think it's more so just they both play a little bit different from each other. They have great flexibility off the edge. They both have really good length for the position. But I think the thing that just sets Hutchinson apart is just that constant motor. I mean, he never turns it off. You watch those games, he is just going time and time again. And I think that really separates him from Kayvon. Not saying Kayvon doesn't work, not saying he takes plays off. It's very evident when Hutchinson is on the field, and you feel it every single time, whether it's against the run, on a passing play, whatever it is, he just is phenomenal at it. And he's just somebody that I think when I watched it, he just has like that it factor. And if you have that it factor, to me, you're that top player.
A little bit of a wild card could be Trayvon Walker from Georgia, who seems to be a little bit. I think everybody regards him highly, but I think more NFL people really like Trayvon Walker's ceiling as a player, maybe than sort of whatever you want to call it, social media, draft world, has not maybe caught up to that. Any inklings of Trayvon Walker going up that high in the draft?
I personally don't see it. That's just me. I mean, I don't see it from a production standpoint, from a player standpoint. He doesn't really work his hands as well as some of the other edge rushers in this class. He doesn't really have a pass rush plan for that matter. He is certainly somebody that has great length and just overall power for the position. He was a former power forward, former center back in the day in high school. He was a beast. Don't get me wrong there. I mean, he was a beast down in the paint. But at the same time, it's one of those players that's it's just not there yet. And he's very versatile. He can play in a variety of spots, but it's what is he going to play in the NFL? That's the thing that I need to know. Where's he going to play? Because in his career, he's only got about 800 career snaps. And that's telling to me. I mean, Aiden Hutchinson had like 850, 900 snaps alone this year. So if he was this good, why wasn't he playing? And I get it. They have a loaded defense, but if I'm taking you in the top 5 of the draft, you better be the best player on your team. And I don't even think he was the best player on that defense. So I have to view it from that standpoint. I think he's a first round type of player. I just wouldn't be taking him in the top 5. If you were, in the range of 12 through 20 or something like that, and you took that pick, that would make sense to me.
Russ Brown from cover1.net, our guest here on Birds 365. All right, that will make my next question real easy. Who was the best player on that Georgia defense?
Yeah, I think it's Nakobe Dean. I know a lot of people are very hit or miss on him. They don't really like that he didn't test during the combine or during a pro day or anything like that because he's a little bit undersized. He's 6 foot, 228. But I just think how effective he is as a blitzer, the range that he has, the ability to scrape over the top, and just that sideline to sideline ability. He is that gifted. He is that talented. And he was the team leader of that defense. He put it all together. He's a great player off the field. He's a great player on the field, but even off the field, I mean, I think I've told you this before, Mac, man, he's, he hasn't had a B+ since the 8th grade year of middle school. He's a great student. He's just a great dude off the field. And maybe there's something missing that I haven't found out, but he seems to have kind of like that total package. And I see a top 10 player when I watch his tape, and I don't know if he's necessarily going to go top 10, but if I was a team in the top 10, I need a linebacker, that'd be the guy I'd get.
Yeah, people are trying to will the Eagles to take a linebacker, Russ, but they haven't taken an off-ball linebacker since 1979 in the first round. So until they do it, I'm not going to believe it. But obviously there would be 2 in Devin Lloyd as well in Utah. You got both those guys as top 20 picks. Where do you have them sort of landing?
Yeah, they're top 15 players for me. The only player that separates the two is Chris Olave, so it's relatively close between the two players. And it's one of those things where Devin Lloyd, he's so versatile, and you see the versatility off the edge that he provides, what he can do just in the middle. He's got great length. I mean, he's 6'3", really long arms, and he's just an impact type of player. And I think if you were a team, like I mentioned, if you're a team that's in the need of a linebacker, it's really kind of pick your flavor between the two. One's a little bit taller than the other one, but they both, I think, have very similar athletic profiles just from their athletic ability alone. So I wouldn't really hesitate if I had to take one of the two. I would just take one of the guys that I feel is best for my defense, and I'm moving forward. So if the Eagles were to take one of those guys, I mean, I don't know if they would have a preference. I mean, maybe it would more so be Devin Lloyd just because he is a little bit more versatile. He's not really that guy that you just plug in the middle. You can, like I said, do a lot of different things. So maybe that holds a little bit more value to the Eagles defense. But again, I don't know if one of them might be gone by the time they make that first pick in the first round.
Real quick as a follow-up before you jump in. Sorry, Jody.
Sure.
Because I think it's more likely that the Eagles would go linebacker in the second round where they're 51 overall. So who would your third, fourth guy, somebody in that range that they might think about jumping in the pool with?
That would be Chad Muma out of Wyoming. I think he's a little bit of an underrated player because he played at Wyoming. The talent level might not always be there when he's playing on a Saturday afternoon because it's not the SEC. But he's a great athlete. He is somebody that certainly has great size for the position. And I think when you watch him play, you see the coverage skills from him. You see his ability to be really efficient in the box. He's been a tackling machine for the last 2 seasons. I believe he's posted close to 100 tackles in the last 2 seasons in each season. So I think he's just somebody, if you put in that box role, he's going to find ways to make a difference in stopping the run. And again, he understands his drops in coverage, which is really important when you have, a mid-hook defender or you're going curl to flats, whatever it might be. I think he is somebody that can do that type of role for you. So I like him quite a bit. And if he was there in that second pick, somewhere in that second round for them, or I should say their third pick of the draft in that second round, that would make a great selection for them.
All right, 2-part question, Russ, and it's about one specific player. The first part is, I want you to give me your analysis, where you think the player should go, your draft board, your evaluation of the individual. and then give me your projection as to what the NFL is thinking right now. Teams you've talked to, research you've done, how you think the board is going to fall and where the guy's going to come off. John and I are both very big fans of Kyle Hamilton. And we're both gone on record as saying he might be the best football player in the draft. Plays a position safety that has been devalued by the NFL, and that certainly will affect his draft status. I've seen not one but two NFL drafts where Hamilton is dropping down at least to 15, where the Eagles have their first pick, if not further. One mock I saw this weekend had him going to the Patriots in the 20s, which means the Eagles would have passed on him twice.
Yeah.
I can't believe that. I think he's a top 5 talent. I know John thinks highly of him as well. Doesn't think the Eagles are getting him if they stay pat at 15. Give me your evaluation of the player and where you think the league sits with him right now. Where do you think he's going to be taken off the board on draft night?
I think he's a top 5 player. I'm with you guys there. I mean, he is certainly somebody that is in the top 5 of my board. He is actually 5th, but I mean, it's again, we're talking fractions of a point between, these top players, but he is a phenomenal player that's very versatile. You can play him as a single high safety. You can play him down in the box. You can do a variety of things with him that I don't think you can do with every single safety in this class. I mean, it's a very good safety group, but you can do a lot more with Kyle Hamilton, and it's just about finding the right fit. And I think that's where the issue is one, you see a relatively good athlete on tape, but then you see him running at the combine and at the pro days, and the long speed is a little bit questionable. He might get tested from time to time, but you're not really going to be asking him to run vertically in man-to-man coverage on the outside against, the faster receivers of the league. He's going to be playing over the top, down in the box, covering slot receivers, tight ends, running backs, things like that. So I think that's where he's ultimately going to play in the NFL. I think, it's funny on DraftKings on the draft position of these players. I was doing a show last Monday or 2 Mondays ago, and it was at 6.5 for Kyle Hamilton, and over 6.5 was like plus 150. And I was ready to jump all over it. The next day after his pro day, it dropped down to 8.5. So I think that's really where the range starts. It's going to be, around 8, 9, 10, 11. If he got past Washington, I would be quite surprised. I think it'll be that 8 through 12 range. Minnesota, new regime. If they were able to get a player like this to pair up with Harrison Smith, I think that's a great spot for him. But again, Washington at 11, that just makes a lot of sense with how their front 7 is. I still think there's teams that are in this top 15 that are really going to value him. But there's been a lot of instances like this where these top players, they for some reason fall. CeeDee Lamb fell to 17 to the Cowboys. He was a top 5 player for me. Derwin James, same deal, fell to 17 to the Chargers. The NFL does some strange things, so I think if he falls to the Eagles, I would hope that they would take him.
I don't think they would, and that would create even a bigger problem.
You think they'd pass on him at 15, Johnny?
Yes, I do. Yes,
wow.
I do. Yes, I do.
I
think they pass on him twice, to be honest, if they have the opportunity. But that's just, that I just don't think Eagles are very into the valuation of positions in the top of the draft. Occasionally they come off that. I always tell the story about they really like Christian McCaffrey back in 2017, was it? Yeah. And they, typically are not even going to look at a running back that high in the draft. They were 14. They would have taken Christian McCaffrey in a second. So it always comes down to the player. But I haven't gotten any inkling from the Eagles about safety, or thinking about the safety position, certainly in the first round. We do talk about defensive line here a lot, Russ, and we mentioned the edge rushers. So when you look at 15, my question to you is, how many are going to be gone of the top 5 in the top 14 slots? And then defensive tackle, other than the big kid from Georgia, anybody, Jordan Davis, anybody top 15 level there?
We'll start with the edge rushers. I certainly think there'll be at least 3 off the board. You've got Hutchinson, you've got Kayvon, Jermaine Johnson will be in there. outside of that, I don't know if George Karlaftis would go. David Ojabo would certainly be in the conversation if he didn't tear his Achilles. But then when you go to the interior part of the defensive line, I think there's a chance that maybe Jordan Davis could be gone just simply because of how well he tested. It would be, I think it would be tough for a team to pass on a player, one, that physical, that big, and that athletic, somewhere in that top 15. But then, that would essentially be 4 defensive linemen in total. I would probably say the outside chance of Devontae Wyatt, and maybe that would be somebody that the Eagles would just be interested in because Fletcher Cox is only back on that 1-year deal. Maybe they would be interested in bringing in a guy like that to maybe develop under Cox and stuff like that. But overall, I would say 4 by the time we get to 15. I think there's certainly a chance of 3. I know that for a fact, but 4, I would roll the dice on 4.
All right, let's go to another position that the Eagles have an area of need. And they've shown the last couple of years they're not afraid to draft there. One was a hit, one was a miss. I'm talking about wide receiver. They may very well go wide receiver in the first round for the 3rd consecutive year. Seems like there's a group of 5 or 6 that are thought to be first-round talents. There isn't one that stands out where you go, he's going to go off the board, and then there'll be a drop-off. They all seem to be bunched together. And different mock people have different orders of how these wide receivers are going to play in the National Football League. Run down your rankings of wide receivers. Who do you think's off the board before 14? Does the guy who's left as the highest wide receiver seem to fit for the Philadelphia Eagles for you?
Yeah, between 11 through 21 on my board, there's 5 wide receivers. So, there's Drake London at number 1 as my top receiver. Chris Olave's there. Then it's Garrett Wilson, Jamison Williams back to back. And Jamison Williams would be higher on the board if he didn't tear the ACL. I think he'll be fine as a player, but realistically, I don't see him being the first receiver off the board. Maybe there's a chance, but I don't think so. And then Jahan Dotson is at 21. So those are my top 5. Realistically for the Eagles, I mean, I think that there's a chance that if Chris Olave was there, they would be really interested with him just because of how well of a route runner and the separation ability that he has. Obviously, the big play ability of Drake London, you would love to have that for Jalen Hurts playing opposite of Devontae Smith. You could kind of rotate the 2 in and out of the slot, but I think Drake London will be off the board. I think there's a chance Garrett Wilson will be off the board as well, just because Garrett Wilson's a lot better of a route runner than given credit for, kind of plays it like the point guard position, always trying to cross guys over, doing those types of things, but he's also got tremendous body control. So, I mean, I think there's an outside chance of Chris Olave, and then obviously Jamison Williams, if they'd be interested in taking a guy like that just off the knee injury. Obviously, they've gone to the Alabama wide receiver well before. It's kind of worked out, so maybe they'll do it again. And then Jahan Dotson, maybe that's not the pick at 15. Maybe it's more so at 19. But I think that's somebody that would certainly be of interest of them just because, one, he's right down the road, but also it's somebody that I think is got the ability to win at all 3 areas, all 3 levels of the field, but he's the best hands catcher of any receiver in the draft.
Guy you left off your top 5, who some other people have in that mix, is Treylon Burks, the kid from Arkansas. What is it about him that doesn't get him into your top 5?
Yeah, he was just somebody, like, when I first watched him, I started falling in love. And then it's like, it's like having that girlfriend, the first month's great. You guys love each other. Things are really good. And then all of a sudden, as time goes on, she moves into your apartment. And you're like, man, I don't really like this anymore. She's in my space. But no, he was just somebody that the more I watched, the more I was like, I like the player, but at the same time, I didn't. I just expected more. I love the versatility. I love that, they used him in a variety of ways with split zone looks and have him coming in and out of the backfield with orbit motions and jet motions. I love seeing that stuff for a 6'2", 225 receiver, and I'm fine with the 4.55 40. I'm good with all that stuff. I thought I could have expected more. The route running isn't the same as guys like Olave and Dotson and even Garrett Wilson and stuff like that. And the big playability, Drake London outperformed him by a mile when you talk about big plays and things like that. And from 50-50 balls and just body control, there was times where I just wasn't there. And do I think he can go in the first round? Absolutely. Is it truly, pick your flavor out of those 6 receivers? Absolutely. But I think at the same time, if I had to choose, those would be the 5 that I would take. And then just a little bit later, I would take Treylon Burks.
All right, Ross, somebody's got to get those receivers to the football. And, this quarterback class has been debated by a lot of people, and most look at it as a little bit underwhelming compared to an average year. You mentioned a little bit about Malik Willis, a little outside chance he might go number 2 overall. But I want to know how many quarterbacks you think are going to go in the first round of this draft, and where this class as a whole is against other classes. Are people being a little bit too hard on it? You think they got it right? Where are we with this quarterback class?
I think everybody's kind of in agreement that it's just not the same that we've seen over time. I mean, we've kind of been spoiled in previous years. The Baker Mayfield, Josh Rosen, Josh Allen group was a very good group for a college group of quarterbacks. Sure, not all of them have transitioned well to the NFL, but I think you even look at last year, we have Trevor Lawrence in the mix there. You've got Justin Fields there. Like we've been a little bit spoiled. You go back to, that 2013, 2014 draft where there was just, bad quarterbacks. That's just what it was, but they still went because you pay the premium for it. I think it's the same thing here. I think there is, though, the potential of guys like Kenny Pickett coming into the league, starting right away and doing okay. Guys like Malik Willis, who could be really bad or really good. And I think that's what's ultimately going to get him drafted, because you don't want to be the team that misses out on him or passes on him to let somebody else go. So realistically, I think we could see 3 quarterbacks in the first round. I think Malik Willis and Kenny Pickett, we can lock them in. It's just a matter of kind of where they go. I've always said Kenny Pickett to Carolina makes a lot of sense. David Tepper, former Pitt grad, he obviously goes to Pitt. Matt Rule recruited him at Temple, then Matt Rule goes to Baylor, and he transfers over to Pitt or commits to Pitt. So I think there's a lot of connecting the dots there. Again, Malik maybe at 2, but still, I like Atlanta at 8 if he ends up dropping that far. And then the outside quarterbacks, I think Desmond Ridder. I think you look at the Saints, I think that they, with 2 picks now, I think there's a chance they take another quarterback. And if they don't, maybe it's Pittsburgh. I can't see Pittsburgh rolling into the season with Mitchell Trubisky and telling us, yeah, that's their guy. Maybe a quarterback's a little rich, but Desmond Ridder would be the guy that if you could get that 5th-year option, that would be the quarterback that makes the most sense out of this group for me.
All right, Russ, as we sit here several weeks before the draft, we can look at who's got what picks and do some healthy projecting. The Eagles and the Saints got it kicked off about 10 days ago with a big deal. The Saints adding a first-round pick, Eagles getting a future first and another pick on top of it, and the juxtaposition of a couple positions. Doesn't usually happen this far away from the draft, as big a deal as that was, but it did. And I know what the Eagles were looking to do to spread out their draft capital. I'm not sure what the Saints were doing. You want to give us some healthy speculation? Johnny just asked you about quarterback, and the Saints re-signed Jameis Winston, but does that give them the quarterback of the future? What do you think the Saints were looking to do? Is it just that good a draft that they feel they needed that kind of capital, or are they involved with a quarterback that's going to come off the board? We've debated this trade back and forth since it came down, more so from the Eagles side. What do you think the Saints' motive was?
I think it's just about giving themselves some capital for this year to kind of do what you're saying, looking at the quarterbacks in this draft and maybe seeing what falls in a certain spot. Does a Malik Willis or a Kenny Pickett, do they fall to 10 or 11 or 12? And is that a good enough jump for them to take both of those picks and move up and still get that quarterback? I think that's very much so what they're looking at doing. If they're not doing that, I think they're just trying to put themselves in position for an offensive tackle and a wide receiver. I mean, we know they need wide receiver help. Michael Thomas, his days seem to be done and out of there. They don't have a left tackle right now. Armstead signs with Miami, so they could very well be looking at a Trevor Penning out of Northern Iowa. Maybe there's an outside chance of Charles Cross falling in this draft. I know, at the start of this thing, he was like a top 10 pick, but you're looking at mock drafts now, and he's not even in the first round. So I don't know if something came up, but I did know the New York Giants were very much linked to him during this process, but now I'm not seeing him mocked there. So I don't know. And that's from like the more well-connected Daniel Jeremiah's of the world. So I do wonder, is there something up with that? But other than that, I mean, I don't know if they would go another position outside of quarterback, offensive tackle, receiver. I think those are the most glaring needs. And again, I think they're just going to wait to see what quarterbacks potentially fall or are made available and then go from there.
It's interesting you bring up DJ Russ, and we had Ben Solak on from the Ringer last week, and he mentioned something that made me chuckle. So I wanted to get your thoughts on it. He said, anytime you hear guys like DJ or Todd McShay or Mel Kiper, they talk about the depth of the draft. That means the top of the draft. That's code for the top of the draft isn't what it typically is.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that way? Because we talk about Aiden Hutchinson, number one. He's not Myles Garrett. He's not the Bosa's. He's not Chase Young.
Mm-hmm.
Do you buy into that? Maybe the tippy top of the draft isn't as good as it normally is.
Yes and no. I mean, I struggle with that one because I like the top of this draft of the edge rushers, but also I like the depth of this draft as well. I think it is just overall collectively a very talented group. I think when you look at a player like Arnold Ebiketie out of Penn State, I think he's a first round player. He's 18 or 19 on my board. I think he is that good of a player. And he's somebody that could very well be in the mix for a handful of teams in the top 20, top 25. But if you go to the second and third day of the draft, I mean, you look at Drake Jackson out of USC, very productive player, has that basketball background as well. I like him off the edge. Myjai Sanders out of Cincinnati would be that player, but he's just not there right now because his playing weight is all over. One day he's playing at 240 and then he checks in the combine at like 224. It's like, I don't know what to do with you. So I think it's a very deep group. I didn't even get into like Boy Mafia out of Minnesota. I like this group overall. It's Ben's awesome. Ben makes a great point there. But realistically, I think the top of this draft is relatively good at edge rusher, and I think you can again find some steals later on as well.
All right, Russ, last one for me, and we're going positionally again. Because the Eagles may very well take a cornerback with one of their first two picks. They need to fill in the starter role with the fact that they haven't re-signed Steven Nelson. They could use to get younger at that position anyway. Sauce Gardner seems to be going somewhere in the top 10, maybe as high as number 4. I know Eagle fans just love him. I don't know if it's the nickname or they really did watch every Cincinnati game this year. I find that hard to believe. But he is probably not going to be available to them. But other than that, I think that any of the corners could come down to number 14. Stingley is higher ranked in some, not so high in others. Certainly, Trent McDuffie could be a guy available to him. Andrew Booth is another one that has been potentially thought to be a mid-first round pick. Give us do you agree that Gardner is number 1 and probably is not going to be in there in the middle of the first round? And then give us your evaluations and rankings of the other corners who may be there for the Birds.
Yeah, Sauce Gardner is number 1 on my board. I certainly got lost in the sauce when watching him, but I also watched him when he was playing in high school. He played at Detroit King right down the road. So I went to 2 of his games. I watched him before he even committed anywhere in college. So he's always kind of had that. I don't want to say it factor, but there was something about him. He was different on the field. You knew he was one of the better players every single time. So I don't think he'll be there. I'd be stunned if he wasn't a top 10 pick. Outside of that, you mentioned Derek Stingley. I think he's a top 15 player in this draft. He would be higher if he played more football over the last 2 years. He's only played in 10 games over the last 2 seasons. And that's a little concerning when you look at the number of games that a team like LSU has played over time, but you watch his true freshman season and you just hope I can get a guy like that with the ball skills and how well he plays through the catch point and just his overall athletic ability. It showed at his pro days. So I think there's a chance that, he could be already off the board, maybe, at 12 or 13, maybe something like that. He could certainly be there, but I like Trent McDuffie quite a bit. I think he would be somebody that I would be looking at if I'm the Eagles. 5'11", 193. He has shorter arms. That's a little bit of a concern for some people, but former 4-star recruit, really great overall athletic ability. He's able to run in the hip pocket of receivers as they run their crossing patterns across the field. I don't remember a time that I've really seen a corner do that as consistently as he does. I like the way he attacks downhill. So I like McDuffie in that regard. And then just, another cornerback, you mentioned Andrew Booth, but I'm going to go away from that for a minute, and I'm going to go Roger McCreary out of Auburn. I think he's more of a nickel, but he's very fluid, he's very aggressive, and he's very physical at the catch point. So I think the way he's able to start and stop, maybe that top 20 is a little rich. So maybe trading back and you can get him, or maybe it's somebody you look at somewhere on day 2 and maybe you move up and try to get him. But Roger McCreary out of Auburn is somebody that I think is going to transition and be a solid pro, whether it's outside at times, but more so in the slot.
All right, going to finish up off the beaten path, Russ. Follow Russell Brown at Russ NFL Draft, cover1.net. If you're in Detroit, Woodward Sports in the Detroit area. I need a punter, Russ. How early is Matt Araiza going to go in the NFL Draft?
I could see 4th or 5th round, if I'm being honest, just because that late. I mean, he's booting them like 70 yards consistently.
I got to go 3rd round. I want to see a 3rd round punter.
When we finish this up, I am going to go to DraftKings and see if he's got a draft position on there yet. And if he does, I might take you on that. So we'll see. But yeah, I mean, he'll probably be the first one off the board. He might be the only one drafted, to be completely honest. But yeah, he can certainly boot it. And I know some people that say, if you got 3 or 4 picks in the first round or in the top 50, you might as well roll the dice on this guy because he can flip the field for you, and that's a benefit. But I don't believe that.
We'll see if it plays out that way. Punter going in the Johnny's rooting day 2. This kid was a monster. I'm with him on that. Russ, great stuff. We appreciate you coming on. We'll probably invite you back after the draft has happened. We appreciate the preview. We'll take you on the flip side with the review. Thanks for jumping on board, bud.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Russ Brown from cover1.net giving us his draft insight. And he's not the first one to mention McCreary, J-Mac, the quarterback from Auburn.
Yeah.
Not going to be a first-round pick. Probably not. I should never say never. But a high second-round pick. How he loves to play the draft game, moving in, moving out. If they don't like the cornerback that's left, if you go 2 different positions, and they could go D-line, wide receiver, all right, probably not safety and or linebacker because that's not their purview, but they may go with an offensive lineman. You never know. If they don't get a corner in the first round, they may need to get aggressive in the second round.
Yeah.
And a guy like McCreary, who may go before where they're slotted to go in the second round, could be someone they really take a look at. All right, John McMullen, Jody McDonald, your back-to-back guys here on Birds 365. Come back. We got some more Eagles stuff to break down. And then Chris Franklin, our buddy from NJ.com, is going to join us in hour number 2.